Welcome back to our Men's Forge group talking about anxiety. I have Pastor Jordan with me here, and Pastor Ethan will be up shortly. He's getting us started on the sound booth. So let's kind of recap, Jordan, with what we had discussed the last couple of times. We're going to get into some new material today. But when it came to anxiety, we started the conversation by discussing 5 big consequences of someone who lets anxiety control them. Now, one of the consequences was missed opportunities. When you're anxious, of course, we discussed that anxiety is living in fear rather than peace. And when you live in fear, you miss opportunities. You're afraid to go places. You're afraid to be around people. You're afraid to do things. And we said the second big consequence was lost friendships. People that you were once connected with, when you are in extreme anxiety, letting it control you, you'll find that those people are even anxious around their friends. They're definitely anxious around meeting new friends, and so as you're living life, these friends who are going to fellowships, going to hang out with people, they want to bring you along. You continually tell them no. They're just going to eventually, a lot of them, drift away from you, and so you miss the opportunities and you lose friendships. Number 3 was sleeping, problems with sleeping. This is one of the most common ones, and probably one of the ones you'll find is going to be the first consequence. Lost sleep is a big deal because when you don't sleep properly, it affects your ability to make decisions the next day. It affects your ability to move forward the next day. You know, the last one, depression, is a combination of things. Obviously is a consequence of anxiety, but if you're not sleeping well, the lack of sleep on your physical condition will also lead to deep depression. And then we said the last one was poor decisions. So we got missed opportunities, lost friendships, problem sleeping, poor decisions, and depression. Now, some consequences are actually, there's even more that kind of come from these main 5 ones, these big 5 ones, and there's other ones that stem from it. But you can see the danger of someone who was once living a happy, healthy life, letting anxiety control them. Now, this is where they end up. And so what can you do as a friend, as a family member, as a believer? What can we do for people who are going through these 5 consequences, all or some of them? And that's where we left off, so let's pick up today talking about anxiety. I want to start the conversation by reminding people that anxiety is living in fear. The Bible tells us that love casts out all fear, and so we need to remember that if you really want to overcome the anxiety in your life, the fear in your life, you need to connect with God, love Him, and recognize His love for you. Now, if you're not saved, there are still some practical ways to overcome anxiety. But if you are saved, that's one of the first things that you should be doing is loving God more and allowing God's love to overwhelm you. The second practical, which even an unbeliever can benefit from, is truth. You see, here's the thing about anxiety. Anxiety is not only going to take place when you believe lies, but anxiety often overwhelms you and controls you when you believe lies. You see, there's a lot of people who are fully aware of the truth. They know that if I get this job, I'll have to make some sacrifices for my family, but I'm going to make these choices cognitively. I'm going to do this thing, accepting the consequences. I'm not anxious about it because I know what I'm getting into. Whereas the other person who hasn't done their research, getting a new job, and they're anxious about the new job because they don't know what to expect. So anxiety is often a fear of the unknown, a fear of things that you're ignorant of. And when you understand truth, when you believe truth, when you embrace truth, it may not erase anxiety completely, but it definitely brings it down to a level that is functional. You can function in your anxiety when you embrace truth rather than deception or just downright ignorance or lies. Ethan, what do you think? The idea of letting truth control us rather than lies and deception and what that does to our anxiety levels.
I like illustrations, so I kind of liken it to a kid who's trained, 2 kids. Maybe they both have the same level of athleticism. There we go. But one trains and practices game scenarios. The other kid just kind of hangs out and then shows up on game day. They both say, "Oh, I'm ready to play." Well, one kid is going off of what he's learned. He's practiced in-game scenarios, so instead of having to think and stress out about what am I supposed to do, he knows what he's supposed to do. The other kid thought, "Oh, I got this because I'm athletic," but he doesn't have it because now he's having to think about what he has to do, and instead of everything becoming just instant reaction. I know what to do in the situation. It might be tough, but I know how to get in, get out. Now he's having to work twice as hard. And that's the same way with anxiety. Like it's prepping somebody with the truth before they have to get to that point. I mean, obviously, we're kind of talking a little bit aside from those who maybe really struggle with like the chemical part of it, the biological part.
I do believe
Right.
that some of these can help, even if their
Yeah.
anxiety is a result of a health issue. Obviously, there's other steps they should
Right.
take, but these things can still help.
Right, yeah, and it's just telling them it's that preparation for I guess I should say this. A lot of this preparing them before the situation comes up. That's where the big things, because by the time you present someone with anxiety with that decision that they have to make, it's almost too much to bear. Whereas, you say this a lot, like before they get to that point where they're forced to make a decision, give them almost like micro decisions, so that by the time that they have to make a choice in a situation where the anxiety could be high, they at least know they have that truth in the background that says, okay, I don't have to stress out about, for example, this social interaction because this is safe. I know the environment. I know who I'm talking to. I know who I'm with. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Jordan, what do you think? The idea that truth allows us to have a hold over anxiety rather than anxiety controlling us.
I think that should probably that prep should probably happen before it gets to you. I kind of go back to this verse. I mean, it's in our text. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. But verse 8 is it's the key. I think it's the key to it. Whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. I mean, when your mind is cluttered with things that aren't even reality, then yes, your mind's going to go somewhere else other than where God wants it to be. It's going to go to a place where it's going to welcome, I would even think, demonic oppression of some kind. It's going to welcome those things. And so I guess, I don't know, this is just the way my mind thinks, but what are you, for instance, when I have guests over, my wife and I clean house, we make it look presentable, not perfect, but presentable, make sure, it's just prepared for guests. And I think in the same sense, we should prepare our minds for what is true and what is good and what is just, and welcoming those thoughts in, so that when it's almost like that would be the filter in which everything else comes through. So, for instance, something makes you nervous. Well, filter it through this. Is it true? Is it just? Is it of good report? Is there any type of praise that belong, or a good virtue, or anything like that? Does it belong here? And if it doesn't, then you have your answer. You shouldn't worry about that. I think that there are real situations that not call for worry, but I should say that there are true situations that would cause someone to worry. But then that kind of escalates the thinking. Okay, so what else is true? God is greater than. I know this is all. It's kind of it's cliche, but it's also true, because you're facing a real circumstance, and this is a hard thing to go through. Well, what is truer than this? What is more real than this situation? Well, God provides no means for being worried. He doesn't worry. He doesn't wring his hands. He's not. And so, in a sense, I think that's the place that we should be at. And I know that's like it's almost like a place that we never think that we could reach, but I believe we actually could reach that, to where we can face something that is real, that is true, that is in front of us, with very little to no worry, because we have trust in God. But when we are practicing, having our mind just filled with things that aren't true, that are of just filth, it's just going to clutter, and then you get things that actually make you worry, and that becomes the filter. The things that are not true, that are false, that becomes your filter, and it just collects and it just clogs up, and then that's what keeps you up at night. That's what makes all relationships fail.
when someone struggles with anxiety, one of the loudest voices that they will hear are the ones inside their own head. The problem with someone who has anxiety is not that they're not listening, it's that they can't hear over their own emotions. And so for someone to overcome anxiety, they have to understand that the enemy is within. The enemy is their emotional ups and downs, their emotional roller coaster, yelling and screaming at them, watch out, look out, you can't trust that person, you can't go there, this is going to happen to you, you could die, your life will be a wreck, all these things. Your emotions are just telling you all these things. Now, some of these things may be true. Most of them are probably not. And to overcome anxiety, you have to sit down and compare your emotions to truth and find out where the reality resides. And if there is an occasion where your emotions are telling you the truth, then you have to step into what Jordan just mentioned, faith. But there's no need for faith when you can just determine my emotions are lying.
Right.
I don't need to have faith in God because faith in God, you could say, okay, I need to have faith that God's word is true over my emotions, but you don't need faith in God to protect you from something that is not true. And so for those who struggle with anxiety, instead of getting them right to like the last step that Jordan mentioned and have faith, that's a really big deal for them. That's a big step. I would recommend for those who are overcome with anxiety to start at the ground level and to separate truth from lies. And there's no need to have faith when they recognize my emotions are lying to me. Go ahead.
So just a quick, just in your eyes, so like whether you're working with a full-blown adult or a young adult, like like a teenager
Sure.
or a child, either way, the responsibility of the person who's helping that person who's struggling with anxiety is to get them. One of the first things is to help them to, delineate. Okay, this to separate the emotions,
the lies from the truth, the
lies from
emotions
truth.
from the truth. That's what I
Okay.
do. Yeah, when I'm working with someone, it's not like go straight to have faith in God, because now you're telling them to have faith in God in everything that bothers them all day. It's just so much for them to bring. It's overwhelming.
Right.
They can't in their head fathom bringing everything to God, trusting God, and walking away from it. It's an impossible task. So you cut off the fat, right? All these lies. Well, let's just first of all figure out what are the lies, and then trust God. Let me give you guys a story. My daughter Abby struggles with anxiety, and she's my oldest one. She had a opportunity recently. Did I tell this story where she went to the Hubbard Park? Did we talk about this? And she went on okay. So she was going to go hiking. She's been hiking at the Hubbard Trail, Hubbard Park there since she was like 3. I was taking her when she was 3 years old up to Castle Craig. And so that trail, it's about, an hour and a half or 2 hours, maybe hike if you're going really slow, right? I'm talking about she's like 3 or 4 years old, right? Really slow when she was young. And so there obviously are snakes out there. And Abby has never seen a snake on this trail, not once. And we've been on this trail countless times. And she was 12 years old. This was just recently. Someone was talking about snakes on the trail of Hubbard Park, and we were at the very top of Castle Creek. We drove up, and we're going to hike down, and she had a panic attack. She was so anxious. She was crying. She did not want to go down the trail. And I said, Abby, what's going on? She said, well, there's snakes there. And so for me just to say, Abby, have faith in God, would just been an impossible task for her at that point. So this is what we did. We sat down before we went down the trail, and I said, Abby, how many times have you been on this trail? She said, a lot. I said, how many times have you seen a snake? She said, never. All right, so that's the first thing you understand, is that the idea that there are snakes, yes, they are, but they're not on the trail hunting you down. It's not a horror movie where they're going to chase you down and eat you, right? And I said, let's talk about snakes now. If there was a snake, and if you saw one, I said, the truth is snakes don't chase humans. They usually run away. She said, well, what about people who get bit? I said, well, it happens. Sometimes they're not paying attention. They step on one. Maybe their dog, or they're out in the brush picking something up, and there's a snake nearby, and it bites them. But I said, if you stay on the trail, and if you're not chasing snakes, they're not going to jump out of the bush to chase you and bite you. And I said, if you can believe that truth, based off of your experience and based off of what I just told you from life in general, you can have a good day today. You know what? She accepted that. It was still a little harder for her because in the back of her head, there was still this idea there's snakes there. But now it was possible for her to trust God with what was left of her anxiety once we eliminated all the lies in her head about snakes chasing her down the trail and biting her, right? Because that's how she pictured it. And so for someone with anxiety, they got to get rid of these false stories, these lies that their emotion is telling them. And then what's left, that's what you give to God. Because there is a truth. Snakes do exist.
Yeah.
There is a truth. You can get bit by one.
Right.
There is a truth. They're on that trail. But that's a much smaller truth than what her head was telling her at first.
Right.
So eliminate the lies, and what's left give to God.
Yeah. I'd also add to that for if there's any parents listening to this in person or online, that when did you start working with Abby when you recognized that?
4 or 5 years old. I recognize it right away.
So because Pastor Russ has built a lot of trust, so that he's become a source for truth for someone who has anxiety, and that's one of the things that I'm recognizing I have to do a lot more as a youth pastor is you have to very immediately step into that role of I am a source of truth. I'm a source of truth, because at some point there's teenagers or there's adults in your life that struggle with it, but if they don't see you as a source of truth, then no matter how much you can help them, no matter how well equipped you are to help them, they're not. There's a reason why people who are in the counseling business are they're looking for a lot, because people, they haven't built necessarily a lot of trust yet. They're strictly going off like the name of their organization
and trusting the name. All right.
Anyways, go ahead.
So let's talk about some areas where you can cut off the fat. You can cut off the lies, so someone is left with just maybe the bare minimum of anxiety that needs to be then, as Jordan put very well, just given to God in faith. Mm-hmm. So I find that one of the first places someone really struggles with anxiety is fear of failure. They are afraid to try something new because they're afraid they'll fail. They're afraid to get a new job. They're afraid they'll be fired. They're afraid to try a new church. They're afraid that it will fall apart and no one will like them. And so failure is in their head everywhere. They cannot succeed. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16 says, "For a just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again, but the wicked shall fall into mischief." So obviously when it comes to these fears that we're going to discuss, there are so many different avenues you could take depending on the age of the person, what their direct fear of failure is. Is the fear of failure with the job, with a class assignment, with the relationship? But let me give you some ideas of how this might look. See, they're coming into this thinking failure is a bad thing. And so maybe throughout their life, every time they failed, an adult figure, a coach, whoever, always ragged them every time they failed. So in their head, failure is like the worst thing that could happen. It's better not to try, not to do anything than to fail, because failure is the worst. And what they need to understand is the truth, Proverbs 24:16, failure is not the issue. The issue is letting failure keep you from continuing. Mm-hmm. That's the issue. A just man fails, but a just man gets back up. So have a discussion about the truth. Their emotions are saying failure is the worst. No, failure is not the worst. Staying down is the worst. And your anxiety is keeping you down. That's worse than failure. Get up, try, fail. Get up, try, fail. Keep getting up.
I don't remember who said it recently, but they said, you're not afraid of heights. You're afraid of falling. And that's kind of like what this is talking about. You're not afraid of the task. You're afraid of failing and staying there. And I don't know. I can't think personally. This is not where anxiety, I don't think, affects me necessarily, because I would just accept it. I'm willing to fail. So I've done it so many times. It's like second nature. Actually, it's first nature. But it's just the way it is. But so I don't think that's. But I know that a lot of people are afraid of doing it because of. But just the appearance of failing. It's a pride thing. They don't like to be seen as failures. I'm not really sure how to help someone with that, other than
let's continue on. Letting someone recognize that failure can actually be a good thing when you learn from it.
Right.
When someone says, "I want to hire someone with experience," they don't mean someone who's never failed. They mean someone who's learned from their failures and will not repeat them because they learned a lesson from them. But there's no lesson learned if there's no failure to teach a lesson.
Right.
There's no experience if you never tried. When someone says, "I want to hire someone with experience," they don't mean age only. They're assuming that because they're 30, 40, 50, that life they have failed, but here they're still trying, which means they've gotten back up.
Right.
This is the kind of person I want. With age should come experience, but it's not guaranteed.
So would you, I'm sorry, quick question. Would you agree that it's not failure if you learn from it?
It is still failure. I mean, we can't change the English language. Failure is messing up, making a mistake, falling down. That's failure. It is still failure, but we need to stop thinking of failure as a negative. Failure is not the negative. The negative is not trying or not learning from your failure. Mm-hmm. Those are the negatives. Failure is a process of living.
Right.
Failure is a process of succeeding. Failure is a process of being alive and trying things. if you haven't failed, you probably haven't done. My concern with people is not their failure, it's their lack of ability to learn from their failure.
Yeah.
But someone with anxiety doesn't have either. They just never try. And they might as well be in the same boat as someone who fails and doesn't learn, because they're not gaining experience.
I think a lot of that has to do with, whoever is tied in with someone who has anxiety. Part of that a lot of that is in the language that you have.
Yes.
So, I love one of Chick-fil-A's values is fail forward. Like, if you're gonna fail, learn from it, because failure is gonna happen. So if it's gonna happen, just
I like that.
fail forward. And then the
That's
other thing too, is just to throw it in there. Jesus and the disciples, he knew they were gonna fail.
Yes, he did. And hired them anyways, right? You might say.
Like, literally, he has the inner circle with Peter. All right, you're gonna be in my inner circle. I know you're gonna curse my name. I know you're gonna fail me so hard, man. And Peter learned.
So if you're working with someone with anxiety, guys, you've got to start with this idea of changing their mind about what failure actually means. Their emotions make failure like the worst thing that could happen in their life. The truth is, everyone fails. And the issue is not failing. The issue is not learning from your failings. Now, there will still be anxiety, but we've cut away the fat. And what's left, Jordan? What do they do with what's left? Trust God.
Right. I'm sorry.
Trust God with what's left. Okay. They trust. Well, you're the one that brought it up earlier, man. I'm just bringing it back to what you said. They trust God with what's left. After in their head they accept the truth about what failure is.
I just failed.
Okay.
Amen.
Just learn from it, Jordan.
I was sitting here looking. I know it's in there, but there's a proverb, and I laugh every time I come to it. But it says that the lazy guy does not go to work because he's afraid there's a lion.
Lions in the streets, yes.
And so it's kind of that sense, like, I'm afraid of doing it in case there's a lion in the street. Like, how often does that happen? So
I think it's making an excuse.
Of course, it's excuses. But in the same idea, you're afraid of failing because of what people think, and rarely. I mean, I don't see it that way. I think that rarely people actually see it that way. I think people more care about how you react to your failure than failing at all.
The right kind of people. Unfortunately, Jordan, there are some high and intense people, very high perfectionism, that they do see failure as like the worst thing in the world. They'll fire you over it. They'll call you names. So if you find yourself, growing up in a family with someone like that as a parent, then it's going to mess with your head. If you have a coach like that who, if you failed, get on the bench, you're the worst ever, it's going to mess with you as a kid. It messes with their psyche. Yeah. And so as parents, let's make sure we don't put our kids under authority figures who have the wrong idea of failure, because it will affect them. Yeah. I am very, very careful about who gets to train my kids other than me. I'm very careful about who gets to teach my kids right and wrong, because if I put a perfectionist over my children who think failure is the worst thing, I am damaging my children. And I shouldn't be shocked when they believe a lie. I let this person teach them that lie. Yeah. So you're wrong, Jordan. There are people out there that are crazy and that will have the wrong view of failure. I'm glad that you haven't experienced it, but a lot have, and that's what's caused their anxiety, is the wrong kind of training. So let's be the right kind of training, and with our children, let's not let them experience the wrong kind of training. All right, let's talk about quickly one more, and that's the fear of rejection. This is a big one, too. I mean, these are all big ones, and especially if you struggle with this, particularly, it's the big one for you. The fear of rejection is this idea that no one will accept you for who you are, no one loves you, no one will be there for you, everyone will ghost you. You know, this idea of ghosting where, they turn off your text, they don't answer your phone, you call them, it goes straight to voicemail, you text them, it comes back as message failure, right, because they blocked you. Whatever, no one's talking to you. That's what's going on here. I thought it was my carrier all this time.
Man, okay,
so
that
fear of
explains things.
rejection, guys, is a big one. And like the fear of failure, it's often stemming from the idea that someone probably did get rejected.
Right.
So a parental figure, a family figure, a coach again, a teacher, friends that they've had have rejected them over and over again, and now they're anxious over this idea that everyone will reject them. So Ethan, what do you think is one of the basic truths that can be told someone if they're just afraid that no one loves them, no one will accept them, everyone will reject them, which unfortunately for them might actually be a truth? So you can't say, well, no, the truth is people won't reject you. No, they know that's a lie. They've already been rejected. So what truth can you give them to replace the experiences that they've had?
Oh man, I thought. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Somewhere out there, there's somebody who cares about you. I'm just kidding. Haven't found them yet.
Don't say that.
No, don't say that. Well, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25. The fear of man brings a snare. So, like,
Yes.
if you care about that much about what other people think about you, you're setting a trap.
That's
if for
a great
nobody
verse.
else than yourself.
That is amazing. That's a great
Which,
answer. Good.
Because I'm saying that because I'm someone who has definitely struggled with like
The fear of rejection.
fear of rejection, like a lot. Whether
See,
it was
that's
in
like your
sales.
life verse. You just went right to
That's-
it, man.
that's my life
That's not
verse.
even on our notes here. You just
And then the second part of the verse says, "But whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe," which ties in totally with that verse that you
that we're
have
going to
here.
look at
Yeah,
here
go
shortly.
ahead.
Romans 5:8. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's with someone who struggles with the fear of rejection from people. I mean, the percent chance of nobody caring about you is fairly low. But even if it was 100% of nobody caring about you, as a Christian, like if it is truly Jesus, God over everything, then that's
That's enough.
okay.
That's enough.
It's okay. I mean, it's really it's going to be rough, but it is enough.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to start. Let's kind of kick off from there. So Ethan's saying he struggles with this. In his past, he's had to struggle with the fear of rejection. So for him, being reminded that what people think doesn't matter as much as what God thinks. So let's cut away some of that fat. You can't say people haven't rejected you. That's a lie, and don't tell them a lie. What you can say is the rejection of people doesn't compare to the acceptance of God. That's a great truth to start from. Here's another truth you can give them, that oftentimes it is our choice of who we surround ourselves with that will result in them rejecting us. You know, you make poor choices of friends. Don't be shocked when your poor friendship choices results in you being alone 5 months, 6 months down the road. There are some times where you can't choose. I mean, you grow up, you're born with the family you've got. You can't, change or replace the family. But there are many relationships we can choose: marriage, dating, friendships, even jobs. Well, no, I got to work. You don't have to work there. And so cutting away the fat and letting people know that there are good people in the world.
Yep.
Find them and stop throwing yourself, metaphorically, at the feet of people who will abuse you.
Right.
Find a place, find a job who will value you. And just one or two people who love you and value you is enough. You don't need 30 and 40.
Right.
If you got 30 and 40, chances are a whole lot higher. A bunch of those will reject you. One or two good people, you'll be surrounded and have trustworthy friends and not have to be struggling with anxiety of rejection. You've limited your circle to people that can be trusted, and you've trusted Christ with the rest. Jordan, what do you think?
I don't know. You kind of nailed it. I was thinking, I was thinking John chapter 1, where it says that he came into his own, came into his own, and his own received him not.
Yep.
Thinking, imagine if Christ. I mean, Christ is perfect, so it's kind of an imperfect illustration. But imagine if he cared what man would think about him. Would he finish the task? I mean, of course he would, but in our minds, I mean, that's not the reason we do things. We do them because that's what we are called to do.
That's
And-
That's
and
actually a
I
good
think
one.
That is, I mean, he is our example. He is our perfect example.
Right.
So, of course, we will be affected by who rejects us. In one sense or another, no matter what your personality is, there's always that one time that you were rejected that kind of comes to your mind, and it rubs you the wrong way occasionally. I mean, not to one person or the next, it will affect you. What I'm saying is that everyone's affected by these things, but if you're going to live under that, that's the difference I think it makes. I've been rejected before. My ideas have been rejected before. I've had a sense of fear of failure, but none of that. For the most part, never. It just I knew what I had to do, or I knew I at least had to fail and figure out what to do from there. So living underneath this fear of rejection it'll hinder you. It would cause anxiety. I mean that's because
Yes.
you're not fulfilling your purpose. You're not fulfilling what you're called to do.
Yeah.
Romans 5:8 says, "But God commendeth or showed or proved his love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." Cut away the fat and say, look, even as you already stated, Ethan, well said, even if the whole world did hate you, and they don't, but let's just say they did, God loves you, God died for you. But there are some other truths. There are good people still in the world. Find them. Shrink your circle, and then trust God with the rest. So we're going to finish there tonight. We've got some other truths to give you next Sunday night, but you got the idea when it comes to someone who struggles with anxiety. Separate the emotional lies from the scriptural, biblical truth, or just reality as a whole. Once you've separated the two, then there does have to be some type of trust or faith. Faith in God for all believers needs to be a step. But even for the unbelievers, there does have to be some trust, some faith in humanity, the ones that you are left in your circle. So choose that wisely. But before they can get to that step, they'll be overwhelmed with all the lies. You've got to get rid of the lies so they can actually have a chance at making that step of faith or trust. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next Sunday night.